And start. All right, welcome to everyone who is joining. We are going to get started in just a minute here. Thanks for spending a little bit of your day with us to talk all about cybersecurity. We are super excited to have two experts here to talk us through some of the technical details when it comes to cybersecurity, some of the customer and trust building aspects and the sales lens of cybersecurity. So we are going to look at this issue from a few different angles. Thanks to those who submitted questions ahead of time. We had a lot of folks who sent in their questions for Q&A. We'll also be doing some live Q&A towards the end of this chat. So get your top information security questionnaire, all those technical questions ready, and we will get through as many as we can. But for now, let's meet our team and see who we're going to be talking to today. First, I am your host. I'm Ashley Kemper on the marketing team here at HyperComply, and I am so excited to be joined by two experts. First, we have Corey White. Corey is the CEO and founder of Cyvatar. Cyvatar helps small and medium-sized businesses get cyber secure so they can reduce risk, build trust, and fast-track their compliance work. We're also joined by Amar Chahal. He is CEO and co-founder of HyperComply, the fastest way for companies to automate security questionnaires and build trust with your customers. So thanks for joining us, Corey and Amar. First, we'll start with just a little get to know you before we dive into the tough stuff here. Information security, super interesting niche field, really hot right now. And I'm curious, Corey, we'll start with you. Did you know you wanted to dive into information security when you were a kid? Is this what you always dreamed of doing? Or how did you wind up in this field?
Great question. I get that a lot. Well, I'm blessed to be, freaking 80 years old. So when I was a kid, information security didn't exist, right? So I wasn't thinking about information security as a kid. I got my first computer when I was, I think, 8 or 9, which was a Trash 80, TRS 80 for the technical geeks back in the Radio Shack computer. And started playing around with it. And I love the power of the thing, even though it had less power than my cell phone today, but I love the power and capabilities of it. And I just fell in love with it. And I've been on computers ever since. And so as I got evolved and went to college and we got a CIS degree when I graduated in 95, and everything I learned in college was no longer relevant because they were teaching the old school COBOL programming, Pascal programming. And then my first gig was working for Microsoft, supporting Windows 95, August 24th, 1995 to today. Internet Explorer, 1.0, Exchange 1.0, MSN Network, I was supporting that. So a whole new world. So that's how I got started.
Amazing. That is a journey. And Amar, what about you? How did you wind up here?
Yeah, good question. I was supposed to be a doctor, so it's been a bit of an interesting left turn. I went to school to be a doctor, studied human biology for many years, but I've always found tech and business really, really interesting. So I started my career at a company called Vidyard, saw that company scale to pretty awesome levels, and throughout that journey, one of the things that was a consistent pain point for the business was InfoSec and having to go through pesky security questionnaires for larger enterprise clients. And then more recently, towards sort of the tail end of my tenure there, more of our mid-market and SMB clients. And so while I don't come from a traditional InfoSec background, I've held mostly GTM related roles in the past. It was always a pain that was near and dear to my heart. And so that led to me joining forces with Cody, my co-founder, who also got a start at Vidyard to try and make a small dent in the InfoSec universe. So that's how I ended up here. It's been an awesome journey.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again for joining today and taking some of your afternoon to talk with us. I want to set the stage before we dive into specific problems or mistakes that companies are making. I want to talk a little bit about the state of security and how we talk about security as B2B companies, and security questionnaires seem to be the default. why are they such a big deal? Why is this the go-to solution that we have right now for talking about security? Amrit, maybe give us your take on security questionnaires.
Yeah. So anything that gets in the way of sales tends to be a big deal, especially in software. So there's that angle of it, but then there's also just usually such a large lift internally to get it done, both on the sales side and on the security side, that it's often regarded as the worst part of people's jobs. I'm sure the folks joining us in the audience have seen or heard of security questionnaires, and I've never met anybody that likes doing them. So oftentimes, yeah, not only are they the worst part of people's job, but they slow down sales, a drain on internal resources, and just a really inefficient way. If you break it down to what's happening here, it's one company trying to figure out if they can trust another one. And, the process has to happen. It's just the process is stuck in the 1980s, right? Usually administered via spreadsheet. Now, there's web portals, but the jury's still out as to whether those are worse or better than spreadsheets. So just not a fun process overall.
Yeah, definitely not a fun process. I have seen these things and they do not scream fun and engaging to me, let alone secure. I'm curious, Corey, you work with so many different companies and probably come up against security questionnaires and trying to talk about security. Why is this still the default? And do you see companies trying to do other things to communicate their security posture?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that this wasn't the default. Like third-party risk management and security questionnaires was didn't exist. But now I love where we live in this time where this is an essential piece of your security program, is being able to answer these. And I love what you guys have done as a business. That's why we partnered. But I just remember when it didn't exist. But let's take a minute and let's think about, we all remember when Target got hacked. Yeah, and I've done many talks on this. So Target didn't actually get hacked. Phasio Mechanical, a refrigeration company, got hacked. And so when you think about how all these big hacks happen, if you Google any large company and Google their supplier network, you can get a list of their supplier network. And what the hackers do is they're like, oh, let me find out all these suppliers, and then let's hack into them, and they're connected to the network potentially, and then let's use that as an attack vector. And so all these big companies like Target, they figured out, let's secure our third parties. Right. And so that turned into security questionnaires, and that's how we got here today.
Yeah. And Corey, I know we hear about Target, we hear about T-Mobile, we hear about these big players who have probably thousands or tens of thousands of vendors, and that's the back door into their security system. You work with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. How does that risk translate to an SMB? What does it mean for them to be thinking about their vendor exposure?
Yeah, unfortunately, most SMBs, they initially start out not caring about security, right? Because they're a startup, right? They're a small company, and so it's not the first thing on the list. But now, basically, take what Amar said. It's changed. The equation is, I'm a small, medium-sized business. I cannot sell into a large company unless I have security, or I've answered this questionnaire. And again, that's how we got partnered. And we had an initial conversation with one of your team members, and they're like, yeah, most of them don't know the answers to the questions, or they don't have a team that knows how to answer the question. Well, we're here to answer it. So those SMBs are absolutely lost. And another thing I heard from one of my early customers was, wow, we know we need this security. We just didn't think we could afford it. And so, making it affordable and making it easy to actually answer the questions and actually be secure at the same time is game changing, right? And the last thing I'll share is, and this ties a little bit into compliance. Compliance does not equal security, has been always the angle, right? You can check the box. Now you have these questionnaires asking, okay, do you have these controls in place? And you have to validate that you have the controls in place, right? And you're doing it and you keep on getting it over and over again. So you can't just do it once. You actually have it part of a consistent program. And that really has changed in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the hardest part that we hear from customers about this security questionnaire process is you send out your questionnaire of 100 or 400 security questions and you get a response, which is great. You're excited, but you open it up and all the questions are yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, or not applicable. Well, that doesn't tell you a whole lot, does it? So how do companies go that next step and figure out, is this vendor actually secure for me to work with?
Yeah, so it's the yes or no doesn't answer that question, obviously, right? Because what happened, and I think the same pain that you're describing happens in cybersecurity insurance. Back 10 years ago, everybody was getting insurance, and the answer was, "Hey, do you have a vulnerability management program or endpoint protection, etc.?" And everybody said, "Yeah, yeah, sure, sure." And one of my insurance partners, they were like, "Our claim rate's like 90 to 100% over time." Back in the day, everybody was saying yes to all the answers, and we were like, great, all right. And then everybody got hacked, right? And so now you got to go much deeper. And so that's where we are now. The questions are getting deeper, more thorough.
Yeah, absolutely. So much of the security world feels really reactive, even with this trend towards, being a bit more on the forefront with security questionnaires, talking to your vendors. It still feels like a lot of companies are sitting around waiting to get hacked, honestly, waiting for something to happen before they put better controls in place. So, Corey, can you talk us through how can companies be more proactive with cybersecurity? What's important for them to think about?
All right, so Ashley, I had to think a lot about that question because you would think about it like nobody wants to get hacked. So why are you reactive? What is broken? And what it comes down to is a couple factors. Number one, let's just say it. The cybersecurity industry today is not structured really to prevent cyber attacks. There's a lot of detect and respond, there's a lot of monitoring, but there's not a lot of prevention controls that are in place. And when I thought about why is that, are we just a horrible industry and don't care about stopping these attacks? No, it actually is a maturity problem, right? Because what has happened is, I'll take, again, jokingly, 80 years old. When I was a kid, I wasn't taken home from the hospital in a car seat and my mom didn't have the seatbelt on. Okay, it wasn't a law then, right? None of that was a law. But you look at security as it relates to vehicle security, preventative controls have been put in place, right? So now the seatbelt law came out in '84, right? And so now you're required to have your seatbelt on, and now car seats, babies are supposed to be in car seats, right? And so those are preventative controls that have been in place, and laws have been made to secure vehicles, and now people don't die when they get into car accidents nearly as much, right? So now you equate that to cybersecurity, right? There's no law that says that you absolutely have to have multi-factor authentication in place. Now, you know that you should, right? And they're coming out, they're coming. It's getting tighter, but it's not there yet. And so that's why the industry just needs to continue to mature so that we actually build these preventative controls in place. And it's just standard practice.
I love that analogy so much. That's going to stick in my brain, Corey. If you don't know you're supposed to buckle the baby up, why would you? But once you know you should, you better be on top of that. Keep everybody safe and secure. You got to make it where you're going securely.
Exactly. I'm so glad I did not fly out the window and get hit on the freeway on the way home back in the 70s.
There you go. And Corey, while I've got you on the hot seat here, one more question, then we'll talk more with Amr as well. But how can companies get started? If there was that obvious first step, a lot of companies would probably take it, but it seems so overwhelming, especially when you're a startup, like you're saying, and you're not sure exactly where your threats or vulnerabilities might be. So how can companies get started putting better controls in place?
Yeah, I think what is absolutely amazing about the time that we live in 2023, everything is so much easier, right? In comparison, when I first started to actually get decent security is really hard. But today you have obviously, and I think about, because I'm a big music fan, and let's just say I love streaming my Prince. You see the purple background, right? So if I want to listen to some Purple Rain, I can press a button right now and stream some Prince, right? But 25 years ago, actually, 30 years ago, it was very hard to do that. And same thing with cybersecurity is back to maturity, right? Where you sign up for something on some of these, these applications or whatever, you can do freemium. You can sign up for free and get value really, really quickly. And so there's so many opportunities just to sign up and actually get a free value and get started on that path. And so that's why I'm so, again, excited about this opportunity, because us partnering together, someone to answer your questionnaires for you automatically, and then someone to actually do the hard stuff, the ugly things that you have to do to be able to say yes to those automatically. Like, what? You don't have to do anything. You just go to the website. So that is magical. That's never happened before in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. And that's a great transition. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk more about this building trust with customers. I know we've talked about why security is important. And while there aren't as many explicit laws, starting to have more in Europe, some in California, but not that many laws in place today really mandating security, it is still one of those things that a lot of companies see as a best practice to help build trust with their customers. So Amr, talk to me a little bit about, as a CEO, someone who cares about your customers and building trust, how are you doing that today? How are you sharing security information with your own customers at this point?
Yeah, so yes, super, super important. And I'd go as far as saying us sharing things with our customers, especially proactively, is a competitive advantage, right? I think certainly for most software companies today, you're going to be handling some of your customers' data, and so are your competitors. And to be able to say to a customer proactively, and maybe even, if you're in a competitive process, be the first one to say, hey, by the way, this is how we're going to be good stewards of your data, is a game changer, right? And so we've gone from this being a very, reactive, fragmented, manual process to getting ahead of it and treating it like it's an important piece, which it is, as a part of the sales process, and making sure that our customers understand that we take their security and security of their data very, very seriously. But I don't think that's the case across most of the industry. I think still most folks are generally caught off guard by a security questionnaire in the sales cycle, and they lean really heavily on a last minute drop everything fire drill process to get through a security review or provide the artifacts that are necessary for the customer, as opposed to.
Why is that? Why does everybody seem to leave their security information for the very last part of that conversation, deciding whether or not to start a partnership?
Yeah, I think it's more reflective of the seller and their sales motion than it is the actual security, or you could be as buttoned up as you like, but if your sales team isn't trained to treat it like a priority and be proactive with it, then it's going to be this last minute thing. And so I think it's really reflective of the seller not bringing it to the forefront and failing to surface it early in the process, right? The best sellers, I think, will ask as early as humanly possible. As soon as there's some traction in that deal, they will try to understand what the requirements are, just like, what the legal requirements are to get the deal closed, what the procurement requirements are. Security, I think, plays an equal role there. And so the best sellers that I've seen get ahead of that. So it's not this, it's, even if it takes a bunch of time to get through the process, even if they still are completing it manually, the best sellers get ahead of it way, way, way earlier. So it's not the bottleneck at the end of the quarter, at the end of the fiscal year, preventing a rep from getting their deal done. And the folks that surface it early can really leverage it as a competitive advantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
There's nothing worse than that last day of the quarter. You're waiting for your sales to close, and all of a sudden you realize, crap, we've got this security questionnaire that is 150 questions between us and that revenue landing in our account. That is the best way to drive your sales team up a wall. So avoiding that, what options do companies have? What's a better way to share this information and to share it proactively?
Yeah. So what our customers do is use some combination of a public-facing trust page paired with a data room that they use to securely share artifacts. So that's step one, right? There's a proactive piece and then there's a reactive piece. So the customer's going to want some set of artifacts, SOC 2 report, pen test, some policies, cyber insurance certificate, whatever it is, leveraging a secure data room to grant the customer access to that, and sort of combining. Oftentimes there's an NDA required. So rather than having an NDA get signed in parallel in something like a DocuSign or PandaDoc or what have you, having that baked into the process to unlock access to that sensitive information is key to sort of streamline that workflow. And then having the ability to audit, who gets access to when, and making sure that, the right people get access to the right content. That's step one. And then, on the security questionnaire piece, they're leveraging some form of technology. Shameless plug. HyperComply is a great way to do that. But the best folks aren't sitting there filling it out manually. I think, it really, really hurts me when we talk to, the C-suite of even 500 employee or 1,000 employee companies. Like, you have a CTO sitting there spending 20, 30, 40 hours a month filling out security questionnaires. That's a horrific use of that person's time, right? And so I think the best folks are moving away from that sort of a manual process and leveraging technology services or some combination of both to get it done, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, let me chime in really quickly. So you think about cybersecurity as a business strategy, right? And again, going outside of our industry, let's just think about Uber and Lyft, right? Back when they first came out, safety was not a concern, right? Now, when you look into the apps, there's all these safety best practices and, making sure you get into Uber, like for Corey, make sure it's the right person. It's not some random, all these controls have been put in place. And so what does that make us as the consumer do? We're more comfortable getting into Uber or Lyft because of these safety controls in place. So same thing for cybersecurity. Okay, so in cybersecurity, I'm more comfortable buying from a company that is already secure. They've already put the controls in place. They have a trust page up. They partner with companies like Cyvatar, obviously shameless plug, but at the end of the day, I'm more comfortable doing business with these companies because they've already figured out security, and I'm not doing it at the last minute. It's not I'm trying to close a deal last minute. Oh, here's our cybersecurity stuff. No, we've already practically done it. You're taken care of from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a selling point. That is something that people should be using up front as opposed to last minute. Hopefully they don't ask.
Yeah.
The way that you talk about security practices, Corey, makes me think of it as a muscle that companies need to build, that it's not just the checking the box, yep, I have my policies in place, but it is a practice of staying on top of what are the new threats? How do I need to adapt? If Uber had never checked in and realized that, hey, security is a concern or safety is a concern, they wouldn't have added those updates. And I think small businesses need to adopt a similar mindset where they're always looking out for what's relevant to us, what's relevant to our customers, and how do we stay on top of that? All right, we're gonna move into Q&A at this point. And folks who are joining us, feel free to ask any and all questions of our panelists. You can put questions directly into the chat box, send them to me directly or share them publicly. Either is fine. I'm going to give folks 1 minute to add your questions in there before we dive in. And while we give folks a minute, I just wanted to highlight one more time this excellent partnership that we have between HyperComply and Cyvatar. Cyvatar is great for helping small businesses get those security practices in place, making sure that you are proactive, helping you get up to snuff so that you can securely store your customers' information and data and build relationships. HyperComply makes it really easy then to communicate all of that security work that you have in place, automate security questionnaires, and shortcut building trust with your customers as your company grows. And we do have some offers for folks who are joining us today. If you would like to get started, you can get a free security questionnaire response from HyperComply, and you can also get a security gap analysis by Cyvatar. So this is a great first step. If you're not sure where to get started, these are 2 quick things that you can do to set your company up for success. And you can reach out to us to learn more. All right, let's tackle some questions. We've got lots of questions from our audience. Running the gamut here. All right, let's start at the top. What are some common challenges in implementing proactive cybersecurity measures, and how can they be overcome? All right, Corey, this one seems like it is right up your alley. What are some of the challenges or objections you hear from folks that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes down to expertise. So most people don't know how to fully implement preventative controls. They will one of our biggest solutions is endpoint protection, and I spent 14 years at endpoint protection and the virus companies, and the mindset of the detect and respond approach. What that means is, like, we're going to get this amazing endpoint protection, and please don't buy the cheaper ones. I won't name them, but if they're cheap and they don't have the ability for you to actually block the execution of malware, then you will get hacked. You will get ransomware. That's like saying, I have a ring camera at my house, right? And I have a really great lock on my door, but I'm not going to lock my door. I'm just going to get an alert when somebody comes in via the ring camera, right? That is detect and respond. So my house will get broken into if my door's wide open all the time. Same thing with your organization. So have great endpoint protection, next generation antivirus, and you have to be able to configure it to actually block the execution of the malware. If somebody says, oh, we're going to monitor and detect and respond, then you're in trouble, because that means, think about ransomware. The minute somebody clicks on ransomware, that next second, your system's encrypted. So even if you get an alert after it that is encrypted, it's all right. It's too late. You haven't fixed it. So having the right expertise is a challenge right now. And that's one of the reasons why we built our business what we did. So where we bring in that expertise. Like, for instance, simply, I'm not a financial expertise, but I've got an expert. I've got all kinds of financial analysts and outsourced CFOs and all that to tell me exactly what to do. So I stay in my wheelhouse. So let's try not to get out of our wheelhouse and trust experts to really help you.
That's really interesting point of view. I think it is so obvious to a lot of business leaders that, of course, you can't be your own CFO. If you've never managed books before, of course, you need to bring in help for certain things. But I think, for better or worse, there are a lot of companies out there who are making it easier for some security and compliance tasks. And it's still important to bring in those experts, make sure that you're getting the direct expertise and perspective that you need for your business to go beyond just the basics and make sure you're actually securing your information. You also brought up a point about, phishing and clicking on malware. And we got a question, Corey, I'm curious for your take. How can you efficiently monitor your staff to mitigate risk? Since so much risk these days is human-based, it is just, people not knowing best practices. How can companies better monitor their team?
Yeah, I hit it from a few different angles. Number one, you got to have security awareness training, because if you don't have that, you don't know the latest and greatest attack vectors that the hackers are trying. So that needs to be, table stakes. The second piece of it is I want to be clear on the angle and the question. The cybersecurity companies aren't monitoring the employees. We actually are protecting them. And there's a difference between the two, right? Because monitoring means watching what they're doing, but protection means preventing them, when the inevitable, like, everybody's going to click on something. Hell, I'm going to click on something one day, right? It happens, right? Because what's happened with phishing, spear phishing, and types of attacks, we all use social media. And so there's so much information about all of us out there. So you can get very specific, Ashley, and say, Ashley, I saw you at this event. I was there too. And I was hanging with those same friends you were, whatever. And check out this picture of all of us. And you're like, that's obvious. We can find that from Instagram and LinkedIn and everything else. So somebody's going to click on that. And then when they make that mistake, unfortunately, you need to have the preventative controls in place. When they click on it, it tries to download malware. And there's a few things to talk about just phishing really quickly, what's happening. So the goal is not to get the phishing email in to begin with. So you need email security to block phishing, but that's not 100%. So then once it gets past that, then the next step is when they click on the link and it tries to redirect you to a malicious site, malicious.com, then that website's blocked because we know it's a malicious bad site. So you have browser and website security built in. Now, let's just say you get past that and then it tries to download the malware. Then when it tries to download the malware and execute on your system, you have to be in blocking, not detect and respond. That's how you stop phishing. So it can be stopped. You just got to have the proper controls in place.
Awesome. That is super helpful. Definitely beyond the mandatory once a year, spend 30 minutes clicking through my security training slides, actually working with your team and putting those controls in place to be a little bit more proactive and going above and beyond. All right, we've got a question here. I'm going to throw this one your way, Amr,
Sure.
about fighting security breaches. And of course, I think the things that Corey just said apply, of course. But how can third-party risk management also play into fighting breaches?
Yeah. So Corey mentioned this a little earlier, and there's this relatively newfound importance placed on TPRM, third-party risk management. And Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's because most breaches come from the supply chain, right? Am I right there, Corey? And yeah. And so, and it makes sense, right? Like if you think about your own footprint as an organization versus the expanded footprint of your entire supply chain, there's just so much more surface area there for things to get breached. And so I think having a really good understanding of who's got your data, what are they doing with it, how are they processing it, having a really good TPRM solution in place. And I don't think you have to be a big enterprise to do that. Corey, curious to hear your thoughts on what can an SMB do, let's say, sub 1,000 employee company, what can they do to make sure that they've got a good handle on their supply chain and that they're minimizing the risk of breaches from that specific surface area?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. What I've seen, and this still is a maturity problem. You have the larger companies, they figured out that, if supply chain company ABC gets hacked, they have access to our data. Nobody knows who ABC company is, but they know who we are. So we're liable. It's our data. So we're screwed. We gotta secure them. Now, the smaller ones that are using other third parties, and they aren't thinking at that level yet for the most part. Because again, they're still growing their business, they're still trying to get there. And so, they, from a reputational perspective, they aren't that big yet. So they're still trying to evolve. But they have to realize that, unfortunately, there are laws coming out that are going to require them to report that they've had a breach, whether it's a third party or not. So now they gotta step up and level up to get to that next level. So now what has happened, it used to be big companies had the cybersecurity challenge. Now small companies have the same security questionnaires, the same laws, especially here in California, the CCPA and CCPRA has just come out. So CPRA has just come out. And so all these new requirements are there. So what's really challenging is small companies have the same requirements as large companies. That's why they need to, outsource cybersecurity and be able to get there efficiently. Because the minute they hire a CISO, they've just spent more money than the whole program in many cases, and they still got to implement things. So that's what's happening. That's the evolution that's happened today.
Yeah, the space is moving so quickly. One of the questions we see most often on a questionnaire is around breach notifications, right? Where if you are passing your data to a third party, our customers answer questions like that all the time around, in the event of a breach, what is your reporting SLA? How quickly will you let us know? Big companies are going to have a process baked out for that. But like you said, the same requirements that are placed on the enterprise are now being placed on SMBs, and they need to have a way of dealing with it. And so working, again, shameless, perhaps the most shameless of shameless plugs, working with Cyvatar is a great way for somebody to get ahead of that, right? Especially at the SMB level.
Yeah, one quick comment to this, and I want everybody, especially SMBs, to think about this. I've run incident response teams for about 24 years before I started this company, and breaches fall into two different categories. Okay, one category is what I call nation state threat actor, and if you have a nation state coming after you, they're going to probably get in because it's their job nonstop 24/7 to get in. I'd say that's 2% of the hacks, right? The rest of them are what I call drive-by hacks. Okay, so drive-by hack is this. So if I'm driving down the street, Amar, and I'm looking at all the houses on the street, and I look at your house, and you've got your garage door up, I see a nice fancy car and bikes and all kind of cool stuff in the garage, and your side gate's open. But as I look and keep going down the street, and Ashley's house, like, it's buttoned up, like the garage door's down, the side gate's closed, and like nothing. So whose house am I going to go and break into that night? I'm going out to your house, right? Because you're essentially the low-hanging fruit. And so in cybersecurity, while hackers are scanning the internet about every 2 seconds, you're being scanned. And if you're the low-hanging fruit and have not done the basics, you will get hacked.
Man, that is just terrifying. I'm trying to process the fact that you're saying they're scanning the internet every 2 seconds, which, man, companies got to really, there's no time to wait. There is a minute by minute fight that is going on to maintain security of your information, of your customers' information. Hackers are relentless. That is wild. Speaking of systems, we got a very specific question. I'm curious if you have a take on this, Corey. Someone wants to know, how can companies best protect their systems from external attacks? And they specifically asked about which Microsoft Office subscriptions to utilize. Are there magic tools or subscription levels that will kind of buy your way into a minimum level of security?
Yeah, great question. So I'm gonna answer two ways really quickly though. One is, when you think about cybersecurity, you have to think about people, process, and technology. Okay, so this description answer, that's easy. Get an E5, right? That's the highest level Microsoft has with all the controls and everything, capabilities in place. Okay, so do that, but then at the same time, when you talk about people, process, and technology, you got to have people that know how to configure it and the process to maintain it and get it secure. Because again, I could get the best AI cloud manageable door lock for my house, but if I don't lock my door, I'm not secure. So you need all three. So that's the answer.
Great. Thank you, Corey. All right. Angela asked a question in the Q&A. Sorry, I said chat panel before. I think Q&A might be the place to add questions if you've got them. Thank you, Angela. Her question is, convincing sales teams to obtain security requirements and questionnaires early is a challenge. Yes, we hear you, Angela. Any tips for mitigating those workflows? Amar, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of a challenge generally. Like, getting a sales team to change behavior is always challenging, not just on the security side. But I think, well, first of all, you need buy-in from sales leadership, right? That's the most important piece. And once you have that, I think it needs to be a part of the discovery process. It needs to be incorporated into the deal. And I mean, from a pure incentive perspective, reps should want to get this out of the way as quickly as possible, right? It's the reps commission that's on the line. And so I think if reps understand that if they get this out of the way quickly, just like getting, ahead of any legal hurdles or procurement hurdles early on, they increase the chance of them closing that deal in a good amount of time, right? It's like, rather than having things run sequentially, like, okay, we do our disco, we do our demo, we do a pilot. Okay, you want to move forward. What's next? We got a legal, then security, then procurement. Rather than doing those things sequentially, I think the best reps and the best sales leaders encourage you to do those things in parallel, right? Can we get legal, security, and procurement done in parallel, and then condense that sales cycle? So I think it's an understanding that, hey, if you get this out of the way quickly, your deal's going to close quicker, and you're not going to be sitting there on December 31st, scrambling to get a security questionnaire done, right? So I think reps should want to get this out of the way quickly, and they should understand that. Sales management should understand that, and the best sales teams I've seen understand that and get it out of the way as quickly as humanly possible, right? There is a balance though, right? Like in some cases, reps might be hesitant to call it up just in case the deal's not going to close, right? So you should add, again, it's part of a qualification process. And actually, the security review can be used as a qualification tool to see how serious the buyer is, right? Because if you bring that up and they're like, oh, no, like, let's hold off on that, maybe that's a sign they're not actually interested in what you're selling, right? So I think it can also be used as a bit of a qualifying tool. So I do mainly think it's an education problem for the sales team. As soon as they understand the implications of getting this out of the way early, which means a shorter sales cycle, they should want to adopt this, right?
Yeah.
Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
A quick angle on that, because I deal with tons of salespeople all the time. They're not gonna bring it up if they think that they don't have the right answers to it, right? And so if they think it's going to slow down the sales process and you don't have proper security controls in place, they're not going to bring it up, right? So another way to look at it is, if you proactively have a trust page, you proactively have all the answers already there, then this is a selling technique. It is a way it differentiates you. And so the sales reps, if it's already taken care of outside of the sales team, then they're like, oh, we're good. Just go and push, like, show the trust page, show all the controls you put in place. That is a better way to sell. And I think about it, like, my wife was telling a story about Tesla. Tesla went off a cliff and the whole family were in there and everybody survived. And the mindset is like, I'm gonna go buy a Tesla, right? Because the safety of, you got your kids in the back seat and everything, you think about the safety of it. So you're proactively thinking about safety. And I think people are proactively thinking about security of their data. So that's a different angle to it.
Corey, keeping us safe in our cars, keeping our cars safe in our houses. We got all the car safety tips coming today. I was thinking similarly that, like, there's a level of confidence when you have those basics, that same way, companies who are really confident in their product will show their product on their homepage instead of, burying it deep or making you talk to a salesperson for a demo. Just show me what it is. Show me how it looks. If you've got that confidence. Same thing with security. It sounds like if you're confident in your security practices, bring it up early, bring it up often, be willing to talk about it and engage. You mentioned, Corey, that you work with a lot of sales folks in your line of business. And I'm curious if you've had to help your customers put together a business case for cybersecurity. How do you navigate those conversations about getting the right level of, whether it's budget or time and resources allocated to effectively build a cybersecurity program?
Yeah, I love that question. There's something that I've learned, that just when you think about it from the sales process, and anybody that has salespeople that you have to convince to embed security. So it comes back to our ROI, right? So your return on investment. So what I've done in our business is that every proposal that goes out, we make sure that we do an ROI analysis. And I mentioned one of them early. If you hire a CISO, on average, it's going to cost you $300,000 a year. But then you think about it in our scenario, all right, you're getting security questionnaires and you think the answer is, let me hire a CISO. But anybody knows what first principle thinking is. If the deals get more sales and you're asking, okay, why would I hire a CISO? And you keep going back, why 5 times? The answer to get more sales is not hire a CISO. The answer is build in the security controls as more efficiently as possible. So from an ROI perspective, if you have security controls built in, say a trust page built in, everything's ready, then you're going to get more sales and you don't have to hire that CISO, because then the CISO has to hire a security team. And then CISO has to buy all these products, and then CISO has to implement all these products. Next thing you know, you're $1 million in and you hadn't even closed your first deal. So you really have to look at it from that perspective. And I think salespeople have to look at it from that ROI. Actually, the business people have to look at it from that ROI as to how they should approach it.
Fascinating. Amr, I'm curious if you have anything to add there on building a cybersecurity business case.
Yeah, there's a book that I actually recommend to a lot of people that I've read. It's called Why CISOs Fail, written by Barak Engel. Here, I'll drop that title in the chat so people can check it out. Oh, I don't think I can chat with everybody. It's called Why CISOs Fail. You can get it on Amazon. And the whole sort of premise is that CISOs fail because they fail to align the security and compliance function within an organization with the needs of the business. I highly recommend everybody check it out. It's a casual read. It's a pretty easy read and a short read as well. I think it's designed to be I know Barak, the author, and I think the way he positions it as you should be able to read this on a transatlantic flight. So really, really, really good book. Highly recommend it.
Awesome. Thanks for that. All right. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions. Thank you, Amr and Corey, for going through all of those. Before we wrap up, we're going to sign off with one final tip from each of you. And I'm hoping you can each share one actionable thing that a security leader on this call can go do today to help set their team up for success over the next couple of months. What is your one first step for them to take? Corey, you want to go first?
Sure. I think what it just comes down to assessing your security program. And again, shameless plug, but you can go to the website, sign up for free, get a free gap assessment, free external scans. And literally, I was talking to a customer, and they're about to spend like $10,000 for an external assessment. And those things are free. I mean, we're democratizing and making life easy is one of our goals here. At Cyvatar, we don't charge you to tell you what's wrong with your security. That's easy, right? Anybody can tell you that, right? We charge you to fix it and maintain it on a continuous basis. And that's just a different paradigm. So if anybody's charging you money to assess you, then I say rethink that, because you still got to fix it. Nowhere out there, and actually another car analogy. I love these, but everybody has a car, so it resonates. But you think about it, you take your car to the mechanic, right? You know you need to get your brakes done and tune up and everything else, and he gives it back to you. He doesn't do any of that. He just tells you, Ashley, here's how you do the tune up yourself. Here's the issues with your car, all of them laid out in a nice document, and a nice little how-to. That is a security assessment. And they charge you $10,000 for that, but your car isn't fixed. Same thing in cybersecurity. You do a security assessment, somebody tells you everything is wrong, but nothing's fixed. There's no outcome there. So I challenge the audience here to think in terms of outcomes, right? What am I actually getting from this? If I get just a list of work that I have to do, you're wasting your money.
Great tip. That seems like an easy thing. Go check out Cyvatar, get in touch. Corey will tell you what's going on, and then I'll help you fix it. How does it get better than that?
Yeah.
All right, Amr, what's your tip? First step for everybody to take.
All right. My tip is get a trust page. I think, you put all this time and effort into building an awesome security and compliance program, put it out for the world to see. Doesn't have to be with HyperComply. Go put a page together on Webflow or Squarespace or whatever it is. Convince your marketing team to put up a page on the website, acme.com/trust or acme.com/security, and equip your customer facing employees to share that with your prospects and customers. Let them leverage that in their conversations, whether it's a new deal, whether it's a renewal. Let them tell the security and compliance story of your company. And a really good way of them doing that is by sharing a trust page. So that would be my number one tip on enabling the sales and CS teams at your organizations to do a better job of telling your story.
Fantastic. Sounds easy enough to me.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you both again for joining us today, for talking about cybersecurity and how folks can avoid mistakes and get set up for success. This is a tricky space, but thank you for breaking it down and making it feel a little bit more actionable and understandable. And I can't wait for our next webinar. Hopefully have you both again, and we'll dig into even more. But until then, Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
You.
Take care.